Delighted to be joined by my political charms, Angela Regal of Labour, Jacob Rees-Mogg from the Tories. I thought I'd just start, since we've, as you've seen, provided this wonderful, patriotic breakfast. We ditched, you know, the croissants with their European Union connotations and, you know, we've got Union flag chocolates, an amazing pile of, which I'm not tucking into, I'm very deeply worried to say, a great pile of bacon sandwiches. Jacob, when you heard Andrea Leadsom say that people like me have to be more patriotic in our coverage, what did you think?
Well, I thought you should have started your programme with a rendition of Land and Hope and Glory, then we should have stood up for the national anthem, and you've wonderfully given us a patriotic breakfast. I think you're getting into the spirit of things. This is admirable. The BBC could learn from you.
This does feel slightly like the spirit of the People's Republic of China, doesn't it, Angela, rather than the great British tradition?
Yes, I think we can all want there to be a good deal because our prosperity as a country relies on it, but that doesn't mean that our broadcasters have to be uncritical of what's going on when it's going on. You've got a job to do, and that doesn't mean you're unpatriotic. I mean,
you spend all your time trying to hold power to account, Jacob. That's what we should do, isn't it? I mean, patriotism doesn't enter into it.
I agree with that. I think there is an issue, actually, for the BBC. I happen to think the BBC was incredibly good during the referendum campaign and tried very hard, in spite of the fact that most people there were for Remain, to be impartial. And I think they succeeded in that. But I do think the BBC has a strong tone of Remonerism. And that is an issue.
Do you detect that, Angela?
No, I don't. And I actually object to this phrase, Remonerism, or Remoners. Just because there's been a referendum and there's a result which everybody accepts, it doesn't mean to say that you can't be critical or worried about it, or worried about what's been lost and fearful about the future. And I think that the Brexit vote has thrown a lot of things up in the air, and our future prosperity as a country, certainly the people I represent in Wallasey, their future prosperity, is now less certain than it was before. There's a lot that could go wrong, and expressing worries or views about that, expressing regret about a democratic decision, is part of a good democracy.
Now, we'll come back to all of this a bit later, but I do want to ask you about this hacking of MPs' emails. How worried are you about that? Suggestions that, and we don't quite know who, but, you know, malevolent overseas forces may have got really quite confidential information about you and your constituents.
It is extremely worrying, and we've all been locked out of our accounts remotely. And we know that various state actors over the last period have mounted cyber attacks on parliamentary systems. I just hope that they've been able to protect that confidentiality.
Have you had any information yet, Jacob, from the authorities about what may have been compromised?
No, I've had no specific information, but I agree with Angela. It is concerning. It would have been more concerning if it had been the Ministry of Defence that had been hacked. The information could be embarrassing and awkward that's released, but it won't affect national security. But I think cybersecurity is going to be an increasing challenge for the government, particularly as the people who seem to be involved are state operators, and that this is an attack on the nation by another nation, and that's really tricky in terms of foreign affairs.
We'll come back and chew over that and other things in just a few minutes, but now I'm delighted to be joined by the International Development. Delighted that my two political chums are still here. And really what I wanted to pick up with you, Jacob and Angela, about was really, I think, two things that I was discussing with Priti Patel. One was this whole question of how long Theresa May has got as Prime Minister. What do you think, Angela?
Well, look, I think that the big elephant in the room with Priti's interview over there was the fact that Theresa May went to the country asking for a huge mandate, expecting a landslide victory, 20% ahead in the polls, and came back with a drubbing. She's lost her majority, she's lost her authority. She may be in power for now, but she's being tolerated by the Conservative Party. She has actually weakened the country's chances of getting a good deal by her huge miscalculation over the election and calling the election when she said she wouldn't.
Now, obviously, I'm going to pick up these points with Jacob in a minute, but I should point out, for those people who may not have noticed at home, that Labour did actually lose the election. You're not in power.
That's true, and but we didn't win but it was Theresa May who lost. And she went to the country asking for a huge mandate to have a hard Brexit, and she didn't get it. She was actually humiliated.
And that is a problem, isn't it, Jacob, that her negotiating position was weakened by the election?
Well, I think all this is hugely overstated.
Is it?
Yes. Mrs.
Why?
May won the highest vote share of a Conservative Party. But this is really important because
why is it?
We get an exaggerated response to an election result that was not good for the Conservatives, but was not a disaster. The highest vote share since 1983, more votes than Tony Blair got in 1997. So,
but you don't have a majority in Parliament.
That's absolutely right. So I'm not.
But hold on, that's the reality of power.
Absolutely. I'm not beginning to pretend it was a good result or a success. I'm just trying to moderate the language, be a bit more reasonable about it.
I did point out to Angela that they hadn't won.
That's right. The Labour Party lost an election for the third time running. The Conservative Party's position went down a bit. Mrs. May remains the Prime Minister in the normal constitutional way. Assuming she commands a majority in the House of Commons, she has all the authority in all normal respects of any Prime Minister. Legislation may be more contentious, but all the executive powers of the Prime Minister rest with Mrs. May. And our European...
But the fundamental problem is related to Brexit. She went to the country trying to reinforce her negotiating position, and there is no question, Jacob, I mean, you know, you're not naive about this. The mood and the composition of the House has changed, and backbenchers will be more of a problem for her on Brexit.
I don't think that's right, actually, because the Article 50 bill has passed. And we have a lot to thank Gina Miller for, actually, because it is now in law that we leave the European Union by the end of March 2019. There is no majority in Parliament for repealing that law. If the laws proposed in the Queen's speech don't get through...
But hang on a second. But can I ask you a question about this? I mean, obviously, you would argue that we are leaving the EU, but for many people in your party, the way that we leave the EU really matters.
That's absolutely right. But what I'm saying...
I think we need a much more consensual Brexit now. I don't think that...
So you would agree with Justin Welby, would you, the idea of this commission?
I think that's an interesting idea.
What do you think?
No, I don't agree with His Grace. I think that it's rather a naive view, actually, that politics works, that the party of government makes decisions.
Well, look,
and the party of government, as long as it commands a majority in the House of Commons, is then accountable to the electorate.
We do not know what will happen with the Queen's speech next week, because Theresa May, before she went to the palace to reinstall herself as Prime Minister, said there was a deal with the DUP. That was a couple of weeks ago. It still hasn't been done.
What do you think has gone wrong with that deal,
The visit to the palace was a constitutional irrelevance. The Prime Minister does not, in our system, get reappointed after an election. The Prime Minister remains Prime Minister until she loses a vote of confidence in the House of Commons. Well, if the Queen's speech goes through, the Prime Minister remains Prime Minister. But on the issue of the DUP, how important do you think a deal, a confidence and supply deal, a pact with the DUP is to the survival of Theresa May and the government? It depends on time frame. I think a deal with the DUP potentially means this Parliament could last 5 years. I wouldn't necessarily put money on that, but I think a deal with DUP makes that possible. I think without a deal with the DUP, a 5-year time would be unlikely, but I still expect that there would be a reasonable time frame without a formal deal.
And are you uncomfortable about the sums of money that the DUP appear to be asking for in terms of Northern Ireland investment as a condition? It looks like a bribe.
If you want some good news from a Conservative point of view from the election result, it was that it was very positive for the Union. Very good results in Scotland for Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, with the pushing back of separatism there. But I think including Northern Ireland in ordinary UK politics is really important. A Northern Irish MP is just as valid an MP as one from Somerset, and I think we should remember that, and bringing Northern Ireland into the United Kingdom.
We're almost up to the break. Could I ask Jacob just one very, very quick question? OK? We're useful to have a yes or no if possible, because we are almost out of time.
I'll do my best.
Do you think that Theresa May will be leading the Tory party at the time of the next election, whenever it is?
Yes.
You do genuinely think that?
I think she will, because there is no desire to have a change. And all this stuff in the Sunday papers is folderol.
Why is it there then, Jacob? It's been put there by the leadership contenders that are in the Tory party trying to knock off your current Prime Minister.
There are lots of ambitious people in all political parties who like to speculate about their chance. But let me tell you that lots of people, of course, have conversations about the disappointment of the election result and a feeling that this didn't go well, and a recognition that the person at the top has to take responsibility
Things
for
are
that.
changing. I think
I just need to complete, because the conversations then end by saying we've got to hold on to her, and that's what Conservative MPs are saying in the
Not what Conservative MPs are saying to me, but there we go. We're obviously talking to different people. Don't go away, because after the break...